Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. Today, we're continuing our series in the Player's Handbook talking about spellcasting. Today we're addressing a subclass as opposed to a class. We've moved on from the full casters in the early alphabet, and we've moved on to the fighter. Fighters are not naturally spellcasters. They're one of 4 martial classes in the game that do not automatically get magic. Of course, they have a lot of martial prowess to help make up for that, but sometimes you just want to dip your toes into the pools of magic, and today we're talking about the Eldritch Knight. The Eldritch Knight is a fighter subclass that allows the fighter to utilize spellcasting. Now, their spellcasting progression is significantly reduced. They're known as 1/3 casters. This means that they get their spells at level 3 when they choose the subclass, and they stick with first level spells and cantrips all the way up to level 7. Then they get second level spells, third level spells at level 13, and finally they cap out at 4th level spells at level 19. It's significantly reduced, but the trick, of course, is to say that the power of magic is not to be understated, and because you can choose your spells, and you get to add all of this magic to the already stacked fighter class, you're looking at a very powerful character indeed. Today we're talking about Cantrips. Yes, at level 3, when the fighters first get their spells, they get 2 spell slots per day. They come back on long rests. And it isn't until level 7 that you get any more than 3 a day. This means that you're going to have to be very, very reliant on your cantrips. Your cantrips are going to be the real showstoppers in the early parts of the game. From the wizard spell list, yes, Eldritch Knights get to pick their spells from the wizard spell list, and there are no school restrictions anymore. That's been removed. You can choose any spells you like as long as they're on that list. So I have prepared a top 5 list of my top 2 combat-focused spells, my top 2 utility-focused spells, as well as an honorable mention specifically for the Eldritch Knight. We'll get into the details here in just a moment. Before we do, though, I'd like to let you know, Relaxed Fantasy Review has memberships. For just $1 a month, you can support me here on YouTube and get a couple benefits. You get a little badge next to your name in the comments, letting folks know you're a supporter. You get early access to my videos a day earlier than everyone else. And you get VIP access in my community Discord, where I'm discussing some of the upcoming homebrew and special projects that I have in the works. If any of that sounds interesting to you, you can click the join button just down there next to the subscribe button. And if it doesn't sound interesting, that's fine too. The Discord's free for anyone to join. I will still be sharing some of my projects in the general chat rooms, as well as just talking about D&D. And honestly, just being here, watching the video, liking, subscribing to the channel, these are all wonderful ways to support me. So thank you for watching my content here on YouTube. Let's start off in combat, as fighters tend to do. We're going to talk about my number 2 recommendation for the fighter cantrip in combat, which is True Strike. Yes, dear friends, True Strike has received a much welcome upgrade. Far from the action economy nightmare it used to be, arguably the worst spell in D&D, it is now actually pretty good. You cast it as an action and you enchant a weapon that you're holding. The weapon can be any weapon, ranged, melee, whatever, and you attack with it using your intelligence. You make a single weapon attack. The intelligence casting is mandatory in this case, meaning that you cannot use your strength or dexterity for this weapon attack. It is intelligence specific. Once you attack with it, the weapon does its normal damage, assuming that it hits, and it can do radiant damage instead of its typical damage type, bypassing resistances potentially. Now, obviously, this is a little tricky when you're talking about extra attack, because this is a single weapon attack. This does not work with extra attack. So as a fighter at level 5, you may want to question whether or not you want to attack with True Strike, doing the radiant damage with a single attack, or attacking with extra attack, because you get 2 attacks, which means you'll be doing double damage, surely. True Strike gets around this by scaling as a cantrip. At level 5, you do an extra d6 of radiant damage or the weapon's damage type on top of its normal, and then it goes up to 2d6 at level 11 and 3d6 at level 17. What's more, Eldritch Knights now have the specialized extra attack where they can cast a cantrip on top of their extra attack. So you can take the attack action, attack twice, or attack once rather, at level 5, twice at level 11, and then cast the cantrip. So you're adding extra damage, almost like a tiny little smite that you're throwing on to one of your weapon attacks. Now, of course, you have to have a decent intelligence for this to work, so this isn't for every Eldritch Knight. But assuming that you're scaling your intelligence and your strength or dexterity, depending on what kind of fighter you are, evenly, True Strike is a solid pickup. And honestly, even if you've just got your intelligence set at a 16, that's a decent score, and you'll be able to reliably hit with this cantrip. So I'm giving it the number 2 spot because, of course, as weapon masters, fighters love to enchant their attacks. Their number 2 recommendation for utility, on the other hand, is, of course, the classic and powerful Prestidigitation. Prestidigitation is a wizard's staple. It is the classic magic trick, allowing you to throw showers of sparks, create puffs of smoke, create illusory tiny trinkets. You also can heat up, cool down, color, flavor. There's a lot of little things that Prestidigitation can do. I've seen videos all over the internet. One of my favorites is from my fellow YouTuber DnD Shorts. He has a fantastic video, 101 creative uses for Prestidigitation. And truly, that's how good this spell is. It can be as free as your imagination and as liberal as your DM allows it to be. Now, of course, it is a cantrip, so don't get into this idea that you're going to be warming up tiny little fragments of matter in order to cause explosions. That's not how the spell works. That is a misrepresentation. But you still can use it in lots of creative ways to cause distractions, to cause all sorts of effects. It's a great cantrip, and I cannot talk about the wizard spell list without mentioning it. So I'm giving this the number 2 spot on the utility spells for the Eldritch Knight. Before we get to the number 1s, I'll talk about my honorable mention, and that is the combat-focused spell, Chill Touch. This, unlike True Strike, is an actual attack cantrip. You cast it as an action. It has a range of touch now, which makes sense. It's called Chill Touch. It does a d10 of necrotic damage on a hit. It scales as cantrips tend to do, doing 2d10, 3d10, and 4d10 at the aforementioned levels. The necrotic damage is a good damage type. Most enemies do not resist that. And it stops enemies from regaining hit points until the start of your next turn. This is very, very good. As an Eldritch Knight, you're going to likely be armored and on the front lines. You may be a ranged combatant, in which case Chill Touch is probably not for you, and I'd be taking something else. But assuming that you are a melee-focused fighter, and you are on the front lines, and you use your extra attack to cast a cantrip, Chill Touch is a good choice. It allows you to grab an enemy and stop them from healing, or regenerating even. It says they cannot regain hit points in any way. So if you're fighting enemies that have regeneration, Chill Touch gets around that, stopping them from healing. It also does decent damage. A d10 is nothing to scoff at. And if it's scaling up at the right levels, using your intelligence to hit a creature with this, I think this is a top tier pick, and I'm giving it the honorable mention for the Eldritch Knight. Alright, the number 1 recommendation I have for utility cantrips for the Eldritch Knight is the spell Mage Hand. Mage Hand is such a fun spell, and such a useful one. You conjure up a spectral hand that floats in the air. You use your action to control it and move it around. It can go within 30 feet of you. It can interact with objects and even utilize simple tools. It can open doors, throw switches, and it is just an extension of your will, being able to pick things up that weigh up to 10 pounds, which is not nothing. That is most weapons. There's a few exceptions, of course. As well as most tiny objects probably don't weigh that much. So you can manipulate objects at a distance. The distance is key because it is a trope. It is a bit of a meme. The idea that a fighter, instead of trying to navigate a trap intelligently, they may just trip it on purpose and take the damage so that their allies don't have to. They have good armor and a pretty good hit die on top of that. So, they aren't afraid of this sort of stuff. Mage Hand defies this mentality and says, well, I'm an Eldritch Knight. I'm not your typical brainless fighter. So I'm going to use my intelligence, and I'm going to use my strategy, and I'm going to use my Mage Hand to trip that trap over there. It also allows you to do funky stuff on the battlefield. Even though the Mage Hand can't attack, it can use objects and do other actions which may cause damage. That depends on the interpretation of your DM. But even outside of combat, this Mage Hand is capable of doing all sorts of fun tricks and getting around lots of bad situations. Traps are the classic pick, but I can think of several other situations where having a 30-foot extended reach is really, really helpful. So I'm giving it the number one spot for Eldritch Knights. But the number one spot for combat, this one might be a difficult sell depending on who you are, but I think it deserves this spot. It is the spell Blade Ward. Blade Ward is an interesting cantrip because it's one of the few cantrips in the game that takes concentration. Remember how I said earlier how Eldritch Knights up until level 7 have 2 or 3 spell slots per day? This means that their concentration is often not going to be spoken for. They'll probably be saving an emergency shield on hand, maybe a big blastery spell, and then probably one casting of a concentration spell if they're smart with their picks. We'll go over first level spells in a different video. But I'm going to work under the assumption that unless you're in a big fight where you're willing to blow your spell slots, you may not be concentrating on something. Enter Blade Ward, the concentration cantrip, so you can cast it infinitely. It is cast and you give yourself a defensive aura. The idea is that if a creature makes an attack against you, they have to subtract a d4 from that attack roll before it's determined whether it hits or misses. This essentially maths out to saying that your armor class is boosted by a d4. Now, obviously, it isn't literally your armor class, it is the enemy's attack rolls, but considering that attack rolls go versus armor class, it works out basically the same way. A d4 averages to 2.5, so 2 or 3 points removed from an enemy's attack roll. That's a solid defensive buff, and considering that you are concentrating on this, it is every incoming attack. You have Constitution saving throw proficiencies, you've got probably a decent Constitution, if not a great one, as a fighter. This is a great cantrip, which allows your defenses to be stacked. Throw on top of this the fact that Eldritch Knights can learn the shield spell, and probably are wearing good armor anyway. This turns you into a bulwark, hard to hit, even under good circumstances. And the Blade Ward cantrip, because it is a lasting cantrip, it lasts for a minute, it means that if you can throw this out at the start of combat, especially with that extra attack feature, because the extra attack feature doesn't specify it has to be an attacking cantrip. It can be Blade Ward. So you make your regular attack, and then you sacrifice one of your attacks instead of your full action, cast Blade Ward, now you are a defensive fighter. And of course, once it's up, you can just go back to using all of your attacks to do damage. I think it is well worth sacrificing a single attack at the start of combat, or if you're smart and you can see combat coming, maybe you can cast it beforehand. That's up to your DM, really. But I think that this is a solid defensive buff, and every fighter is going to want to pack this. On top of the fact that it is solidly defensive and it really, really makes you more sturdy, it is something to use your concentration on. Your concentration is a resource. You shouldn't be wasting it. So even if it is just the cantrip Blade Ward, I highly recommend that you use your concentration whenever possible, and I'm giving Blade Ward the number one spot for the Eldritch Knight. That might be a controversial take, but I think it is arguably the best wizard cantrip that a Eldritch Knight can pack. And that's it. If you are a level 3 Eldritch Knight and you are trying to figure out which cantrips to take, I recommend grabbing Blade Ward and grabbing Mage Hand and not looking back. If you are looking for an attack-based cantrip, Chill Touch is great if you're fighting specific enemies or you're just trying to do a lot of necrotic damage. And if you do have a good enough intelligence, give True Strike a consideration. It is genuinely a great spell now. And of course, Prestidigitation, always a classic. And yeah, that's it. I hope that helps. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below. Have a look for the join button down there, and keep your eyes peeled for more spellcasting reviews coming down the line soon. Have a good one, my friends.